There we go. And I think we have volume and we're live. Hi, folks. Thanks very much for joining me. Just popped in a wee moment early because we've had a lot of problems with YouTube last night. And hopefully, just doing a wee quick check this for a few minutes to see that everything's okay. So if anyone's there, say hello. And we'll get things rolling at 10 o'clock. But we should have been on here last night at 10 o'clock. And unfortunately, we tried three different times to get our book club on the go, and we're just sort of coming back after a bit of a break, and we got booted three times in a row. So I think we managed to get about 18 minutes in, and then we were gone. We got about a couple more minutes gone, a couple more minutes gone, and we just kind of thought we'd have another go tonight. I think for the best, really, Excuse me. So, just if you're joining me, thanks very much. And we have been away for a wee while. We popped on briefly there the other week just to sort of chat that we'll be back with the book club, and that we'll be running it sort of once a week on Thursdays at 10 p.m. GMT +1. And whenever we go back from summertime, I suppose 10 p.m. GMT. And we'll just be proceeding with the book club in terms of one chapter a week, which is going to make it a wee bit more manageable for me. Because we were just getting a wee bit swamped, actually, to be honest, before we took a break there. And we've had a few different sort of issues to look after here with our family's health and stuff. So that's kind of why, sorry about that, that's kind of why we did take this wee break, folks. Excuse me. Just really look after our health and our loved ones, So there's Bojack Harkness, and good to be here. Thanks for joining us, Bojack. And again, apologies for last night. What can you do? I said, but we'll always have another go. And usually that's the way we work with these things, even when we were doing the science fiction Fridays and Saturdays. If it doesn't go according to plan one night, we'll go the next night and see how we do. So fingers crossed, we don't get booted tonight, and I hope you can all hear me okay. And so we're just coming up to 10 o'clock, so we'll make a wee start. And there's Joseph has already said howdy before before we even got started. So I'm on the pink lemonade tonight, so being a bit of a flamingo. Quite like this stuff. Sorting out the precious precious fluids, of course. But yeah, it's good to be back with the book club. Actually, it felt really much that we, especially where we stopped, chapter 26, we're pretty much bang in the middle of the action. And it's just, yeah, I suppose also where we stopped, I'd argue that this chapter is probably one of the densest. Just in terms of exposition, and action. It's an action-driven chapter, but there are moments between the action, I suppose, where we get little introspections and so on, and some, I suppose, ideas, some lookings into about, I suppose, in the way that Paul's mind is working at the minute. There's Ankit Sharma saying, "Don't forget to put spice in the drink." A bit of cinnamon. I quite like that, actually. I like a bit of cinnamon in my coffee. As always, Ankit, I've always said that I wouldn't try spice because it's it's fatal upon withdrawal, isn't it? I suppose. But yeah, I quite like this. It's just lemonade with a drop of raspberry in it, basically. But here's to your health, everybody. Shlanta, as they say over here. Cheers in Irish. So there we go. So there's our 10 o'clock. So I suppose we've a lot to get through. My poor old throat. Hopefully, I'm going to try and not talk too loudly. As you know me, I have a wee bit of a hard time with my hearing. Excuse me. So sometimes my voice can go up quite badly, and I don't know. So we'll try and keep it sort of measured if we can. I'll try and keep a wee eye on the sound meter. Let it help me. So chapter 7, folks, as always, begins with an epigraph. Very short one this time, taken from A Child's History of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan, of course. And at the age of 15, he had already learned silence. There we go. That's our brief epigraph. It's an interesting way of putting it. I suppose to suggest that Paul's difference, his maturity, etc., that is slightly different. That's not many teenagers that we hear of, learning and appreciating silence. Silence, of course, being the absence of ambient audible sound within rhetoric and music. So there we go. It'll be within some moments of silence, I suppose. As I said, we have moments of introspection. later on, once we're through some of the action, where we get to see Paul, a little bit of Paul's inner thoughts, if you like, and a little bit more about how his prescient ability is developing. Excuse me. Okay, so we begin with Paul at the controls of an ornithopter. Carrying on from where we left off, folks, at the end of the previous chapter, we had that pairing of the Baron and Raban. And again, prior to that, where we left, Paul and Jessica, they were flying into the storm. Have been told that this is the way that the Fremen kind of steal ornithopters and take them to the south, if you like. So Paul's at the controls of his ornithopter, and as he fights the controls, he begins to grow aware that he is sorting out the interwoven storm forces and what we call his more than mentat awareness. The computing is the basis on fractional minutiae. So his mental process is working on the tiniest of details, fragments from this kind of thing. And we're told that he felt the dust fronts. These are the fractional minutiae he's talking about, the billowings, the mixings of turbulence, an occasional vortex. And again, if we had that kind of idea a wee bit about chaos, when we talked about it previously, about that idea particularly of the butterfly flapping its wings, if you see what I mean, causing a storm or something like that somewhere else around the world. These kind of every little interaction, I suppose, that he's feeling, I suppose, creates different possibilities within what's going to happen. So he's sorting all this out in his mind. We get a bit of scene from Frank here, which is the interior of the cabin, like an angry box, lighted by the green radiance of the instrument dials. We often have this familiar green coloring whenever we're in the cockpits of the ornithopters. Excuse me. Right, where are we? Let's see. Just outside. Number 2. Bear with me a wee second. The tan flow of dust outside appeared featureless, but his inner sense began to see through the curtain. Sorry, that was me not being able to read my own handwriting. Had to refer to the book. And we get some of Paul's thoughts here. I must find the right vortex, he thought. So again, all of these various sort of shiftings and these fractional minutiae, within his mind, he's sorting all these different things out. And he's looking for a specific thing, the thing that will take them on the right path through, I think, that will steer them on a safe course in terms of the different possibilities that he's sort of seeing. So we're told for a long time he had sensed the storm's force diminishing, even though it still shook them, and he waited out another turbulence. So the vortex that he's looking for, in particular, we're told it begins as an abrupt billowing, and it rattled the entire ship, the whole thing, the ornithopter, and Paul defied all fear to bank the thopter left. And which, quite interestingly, I suppose, I said we ran over some of this initially last night. Jessica, they can't really see through the cockpit, the tan, if you like, of the sand and everything that's out there, the vortex, all of these things. So Jessica sort of reacts to Paul's maneuver via, I suppose, his instrument dials, if you see what I mean. We're told that Jessica saw the maneuver on the attitude globe. And I've quickly put a wee underline under this. I wonder if maybe somebody could tell me, because we have quite a lot of misprints in this edition that I happen to be using. And I was just wondering, is that an altitude globe? But it could well be attitude, I suppose. And it causes Jessica to, Paul, and she screams. And we're told that the vortex turned them, twisting, tipping, lifted the thopter like a chip on a geyser. It's a wee bit of an odd simile, I suppose. And it spewed them up and out. A winged speck within a core of winding dust lighted by the second moon. Of course, the second moon is the one with the kangaroo mouse, the shadow on it, the Muad'Dib shadow. The language here spewed, and we had a wee chat about the language with the Baron, and I suppose all the attacks and the food metaphors and similes with the Baron, and the munching, crunching, eating devouring this kind of thing. So back, this would sort of line up with that previously, and we have another term here coming up that they're disgorged, so sort of almost vomited out, if you like. So Paul's viewpoint, he looks down, he can see this dust-defined pillar of hot wind had disgorged them. The storm's dying away, and he, from his point of view, is described as trailing away like a dry river into the desert. Moon grey motion smaller and smaller below as they rode the updraft. And of course, the next comment that from Jessica is in contrast to her previous scream. "We're out of it," she whispered. There we go. And so they're out of this bit. It's I suppose almost like we talk about our cliffhangers here, and in a sense, the action here is beginning kind of with the end of the action from the last time that we saw them. I'll catch up with your comments for a wee minute here, folks. I'll get some fluids. Try and look after my throat tonight. Ankit says in the movie they went directly through the storm, but in novel they're going above the storm. Yeah, I don't think you get the whole sense of them being kind of going with it, if you see what I mean. I wonder too, but mine says attitude. It's from the 80s. My book is from the 80s. I mean, yeah. First time Jessica felt fear, strange. There's something about Jessica in this chapter I think is interesting, that she's, if you were thinking about it as in terms of a film, I think she's almost a bit of it's almost like having a scream queen, if you know what I mean, along, and that she's also a bit of almost the action here has her in peril, if you see what I mean. It's kind of almost an old-fashioned thing, but Jessica's almost entirely almost passive to Paul. We get that she obeys, and we get a sudden twist and turnaround of that at the very end of the chapter, where she actually gives Paul an order, and he just, yeah, better obey this. But it seems more that Jessica in this moment, I think throughout this chapter, has to trust in Paul's abilities. But yeah, I think we get a little bit of fear with her earlier on around the Gom Jabbar Ankit, by the way. But it's very much, it's not screaming, isn't it? It's, Paul, what are you doing? And all from this instrument, I suppose. So it's an interesting way to present it, I think. But again, it is one of these kind of action driven, and we want the tension to rise and dip and rise again, and this kind of thing, and it is quite a tense wee chapter, I think, and the sort of the pitfalls of the planet start to become apparent, I think, here. It's almost a little bit of a out of the frying pan into the fire, and you're not kind of almost sure that being in the ornithopter seems to be a lot almost safer than being on the planet's surface, I think. Carlos Crescelius saying, what about the Gom Jabbar? Is that in terms of her feeling fear? I think, yeah. There is definitely some there in the book, absolutely. And Jessica's, I suppose, what's the word? I suppose, a much better rounded off character, I think, in the book. I don't think too many of the shall we say the televised or cinema versions have really developed the character very well. I think the actress who played Jessica in the TV miniseries of Dune from the 2000s, the early one, the first one, is it Saskia Reeves, possibly? I think was very good. And I think the way that TV series went into Children of Dune, I think then that was Alice Krieg, but I think it's Saskia Reeves. And that would have been, her. Yeah, that's her. Saskia Reeves would have been, I suppose, the Jessica to William Hurt's Leto. Oh, there you go. Brought up in Twickenham. That's right. I know that place well. But yes, there we go. Lady Jessica. She's very good. I thought she brought a lot of humanity to the character, I think, but kept the badassery, I think, if you know what I mean, of Jessica. But it's an interesting thing, because I suppose, again, with Dune, within a lot of what we see in the characterization, a lot of it's internal sometimes, But there we go. Yeah. But yeah, it's a good old scream, and then the whisper, we're out of it. Good stuff, I think, So, of course, Paul turns the craft away from the dust, Uh, let's see where we're at here. Turns craft away from the dust in a swooping rhythm while he scanned the night sky. And we've given them the slip, he said. So we get a little bit of Jessica's, I suppose, skills here at work here. She felt her heart pounding, forced herself to calmness, looked at the diminishing storm, and I suppose uses her time sense, one of these Bene Gesserit abilities, to look within, I think, doesn't she? And let's see. Yeah, this is a very interesting little bit here. She forced herself to calmness, looked at the diminishing storm. Her time sense said that they had ridden within that compounding of elemental forces almost 4 hours. But part of her mind computed the passage as a lifetime. She felt reborn. There we go. I think it's quite an important little bit, this. We've talked about previously that Jessica didn't really feel that she would be kind of part of Arrakis until she'd drunken water, if you like, from the still suit catch tube. And so we've kind of had Paul's rebirth, and both characters having a kind of symbolic rebirth in the still tent. And we'd also had a wee chat again with Frank. It's that we have this plans within plans within plans. We have this constant reiteration of motifs, and we've actually talked about, we've had, I suppose, several rebirths already for Paul and a couple for Jessica, and this is another one. This is where she hasn't, as much as she may have been reborn in a similar sense, when she entered the still tent with Paul, the same way that he is. She's also actually pregnant when she goes into that tent as well. So the whole birth rebirth thing is reiterative with her here, and I think we could almost argue that we get another one later on in the chapter, of course, when Jessica's buried in the sand. But this rebirth, this is where she actually feels reborn. And I think it's also quite interesting as well. I don't know what you think about this, guys, that as much as the Bene Gesserit have this, for example, this time sense where we can go, that was actually, looking back, counting back, that was 4 hours. But at the same time, within her own mind, it can also seem like a lifetime, if you see what I mean. And it's almost as interesting that the time sense part of her, it's like almost like a calculation. It goes, yeah, that was 4 hours, but oh, okay, I'll take your word for it. But to me, it seemed like a lifetime. I think it's an interesting sort of way of looking at the actual ability in terms of what it can provide you as a piece of information. As this skill, this ability to tell how long time has passed during certain circumstances, but at the same time, during the event, I suppose it is dragged out, it's prolonged, it's shocking and scary, and to her it does seem like the passage of a lifetime. I think it's just an interesting little touch within the writing, rather than just going, yes, 4 hours went past according to my skills. It would make the character seem, I don't know, less human, less well fleshed out, if you see what I mean. It's a good thing, I think, this little thought process that Jessica has here. And we get, and I think this is also really interesting. So her thoughts here tell us that she feels that passing through this storm was like the litany. So it was like the litany against fear. We faced it and did not resist. The storm passed through us and around us. It's gone, but we remain. And so really just, having having gone through this adventure, if you like, this deadly danger, through the storm, being pursued, and all of this kind of thing. The litany of, I think it's interesting that the litany of fear against fear must have been in her mind, if you like, and that it so readily comes to mind after. I can actually see a complete parallel in the litany, or the response to the litany against fear, as we know it's called, and just an absolute parallel with what's just happened to me. And I think that's really interesting, because that's her thought process, and she doesn't articulate this to Paul, but in a second we're going to see Paul go through the same process, if you see what I mean, with the litany. And very interesting. She felt reborn. But we remain. Paul, excuse me. Let me see. Where are we? Number 9. There we are. So, of course, Paul's saying, I don't like the sound of our wing motion. We've suffered some damage in there. A little bit of dialogue furthering things on. And we get his point of view here, I suppose. He felt the grating, injured flight through his hands on the controls. They're out of the storm, as we're told. Still not out into the full view of his prescient vision. So this is, I suppose, a little bit of the calm after the storm. They've just come out of this. They had escaped. And we get this again. Paul sensed himself trembling on the verge of a revelation. And again, this is almost like another, you could almost think of this as another Gom Jabbar, in a sense that each major crisis point spurs forward the evolution of the character, in a sense. Pardon me. And we'll get to this in one wee second because I see a few people come in. I'll say hello. There's Babs saying, evening, y'all. Hi, Babs. Thanks for joining us. And there's Chris Gibson saying, evening, Babs. Babs, sorry about last night. We got booted by YouTube left, right, and center. So we just thought we'd have another go tonight. It's one of those things. But for anybody who's there, we hopefully will be going with Thursdays pretty regularly, So this is the really interesting bit, I think. Of course, Paul goes there as well. We're just saying about Jessica's thoughts, focusing on the litany. But first of all, let me see. We've come out of the storm, but not into his full prescient vision. Yet they'd escaped, and Paul sensed himself trembling on the verge of a revelation. He shivered. The sensation, we're told, was magnetic and terrifying. He had found himself caught on the question of what caused this trembling awareness. Part of it, and so here's his analysis, if you like. Part of it, he thinks, is down to the spice-saturated diet of Arrakis. So it's the food, the drink, etc. The spices and everything here. But he thought, and this is what I think is really interesting, but he thought, independently of Jessica, he thought part of it could be the litany as well. And here's his feelings on it. As though the words had a power of their own. I shall not fear. Cause and effect. He was alive despite malignant forces, and he felt himself poised on a brink of self-awareness that could not have been without the litany's magic. Very interesting. Talks about the magic of the litany, and I don't know if anybody who's a long-term reader of Dune has ever been in a situation, where you're afraid, to do something. Then you've got this little litany, this I shall not fear. Fear is the mind killer. It is the little death. And you run it through your head and go, yeah, let's get on with this. I certainly have. So the litany's magic. It's just a very sort of positive little, I suppose, meant to be a prayer and recital, isn't it? And at this point, words from the Orange Catholic Bible rang through his memory. What senses do we lack that we cannot see or hear another world around us? I've been wondering about that as a quotation, and I'm wondering where it came from, and I'm not too sure. And I have a funny feeling that it's not a religious quotation, but it's one that Frank's reappropriated from somewhere else, and it's I think it's one of those ones I'll investigate further, folks, because it rings a bell. With me, and I did a wee bit of snooping and could only find it attributed to Frank Herbert. A lot of these quotes that we do find in here within Dune, and some other things that are attributed to Frank actually are him rewriting other people's words. Frank's definition of ecology, for example, is Paul Bigelow Sears's definition of science. He just changed one word. So there we go. So I'm not too sure on the origin of that quote. There's Bojack saying I've used the litany before. Yeah, it's sometimes you need. Yeah, if you're aware of it, I find it useful. I'm not a particularly fearful person, but I've always thought it was an interesting device. For anyone to overcome their fear, of a little mantra, if you like, I understand by looking at the Dune fandom, for example. Which I've investigated a fair wee bit online, that a lot of Dune fans are well aware of the litany and have used it in their lives. So it's just a thought, just a little question I thought I'd ask, but I certainly have. And I just thought it was interesting. But both characters here have come out of this this incredible experience of basically flying into a storm and allowing the storm to whip and move them and kind of flow with it, almost in a relaxed way until they get to this right vortex, and then out they go. And it really has just been sort of like they've been just cast adrift on, inside chaos. They've come out of it the other side, and I think it's pretty much clear that both of them have been probably I would imagine, within their own minds, going, "I shall not fear, fear," all the way through this. It would be pretty scary. Chris Gibson says Neil deGrasse Tyson often speaks about the things we don't know that we don't know. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Oh, I do too. I used to. I was it? I just said I've told people before I'm pretty smart and I'm very well read, but what I don't know fills an entire universe pretty much. And the other thing I like to say is everybody I think knows something you don't, which is an interesting way to approach meeting other people, I suppose. But everyone knows something you don't, I think. Fear is part of our evolutionary brain to increase the survival chances. Fear, not always the mind killer, but lifesaver too. Absolutely. Fear is a very healthy thing to have. I suppose it depends on how fear, as a strong emotion, works on your body and what the circumstances are. But fear can kill you in terms of making you immobile. But then to be immobile in front of a predator that hunts by movement, for example, is a good thing. A lot of people talk about Ankit. They would talk about the fight or flight response, but if we understand nature and evolution, there are many, many alternatives to fighting or running away. Hiding is a very good evolutionary response. And I suppose all our chameleonic type animals and things like that, and mimicry, etc. There's all sorts of things. Fight and flight is is a very much a I don't know. It's a very limited way of looking at evolution. I think it's one of those terms that's got into the parlance, I feel like, of our times. It's things like alpha male and stuff like that, But absolutely correct. A healthy dose of fear is is useful. If you're standing at the edge of a cliff, it's your fear that'll make you go, whoo, not for, I won't go any further. It keeps you alive, and yeah, absolutely. But sometimes we've got to overcome it to get little things done, don't we? I suppose it depends. I think sometimes, granted external stimuli and dangers aside, I think sometimes we're responsible for our own fears. I think they can just sort of grow and fester in our minds out of a little worry, basically. But confronting your fear is a good thing, I suppose. Understanding it's probably better. Where are we? Yes, indeed. So let me just find myself in the notes here. But I just thought, in terms of how the litany is used in the story, how it's structured, where it, I think this is a great example of this. And it's two different characters in the same situation, if you see what I mean. I'm both getting two slightly different benefits, I think, from the litany, but they're both okay. They're not nervous wrecks, I suppose. Right. So they're through the storm, and words from the OC Bible rang through his memory. What senses do we lack that we cannot see or hear another world around us? Okay. So let's see. Jessica, let's have a look. There's rock all around, Jessica said. So again, we'll get things moving. A lot of the conversation is kind of sort of short and directional, if you like, within this chapter. It's kind of, let's go there, let's do this, on we go, this kind of thing. So Paul focused on the Thopters launching, shook his head to clear it. So he looks where his mother had pointed, and we see some uplifting rock shapes where are we? Black on the sand ahead and to the right. He felt wind around his ankles, and there's a stirring of dust in the cabin. So there's a holes somewhere, probably more of the storm's doing, we're told, some damage. And again, Jessica better settles down. Again, keeps the action moving. And gets us onto the ground, basically, I suppose. Better set us down on the sand, Jessica said. The wings might not take full break. So again, Paul nods towards a place And we're told sandblasted ridges lifted into the moonlight above the dunes, and I'll set us down near the rocks. Check your safety harness. So here we go. Jessica, she obeyed. Thinking. Now here we go. They're starting to move into. I suppose this chapter really does take us into the necessities of survival on Arrakis. We've water and still suits. If we can find food, we can survive a long time on this desert. Fremen live here. What they do, we can do. And there you go. We were just talking about that. That's mimicry, isn't it? To survive here, they're going to mimic what the Fremen do. But yeah, right. Let's see. So yeah, buckle up. We're going down. They're going to crash. Basically, yeah, if they can do what the Fremen do, they should be okay. They need food. So Paul basically tells Jessica, you're going to run for the rocks the instant we've stopped. He'll take the pack. And Jessica's run for it, and she falls silent. And you know what? Worms. Okay, so it's registered. Our friends, the worms. He corrected her. I think it's a very interesting statement. Our friends, the worms. They'll get this thopter. There'll be no evidence of where we landed. And of course, Jessica's thinking, his thinking's pretty direct here. But Paul's thinking about the worms already here. That they're not he actually sees them, I suppose, and that's going to be very similar to Fremen thinking, isn't it? These are our friends, but they should have respect rather than fear. This kind of thing. I guess Fremen technology seems like Wakanda, so mysterious. I suppose to them, maybe at this point, I think a lot of is kind of is reasonably practical. And I suppose it depends on if you've ever owned a survival kit or not, or a good one. But on survival kits, I'd argue are kind of should be made for their environments. If you see what I mean, a desert survival kit's going to be very, very different than an Arctic one. But I think the technology, Anka, is it's part of it. In terms of the problem with the Fremen is that they're so dependent on their technology. They're also, I suppose, how is it that they're described? They're what is it? Is it something precision tooled specialists or something like that? I can't remember the exact term. Tell you what, hang on. I'm always saying that we have all this information available here. We never look anything up. So bear with me a wee second, and I'll just have let me see if I can find the right document. There we go. Oh no, that's not it. That's Frank Herbert. Right, bear with me a wee second. Science fiction station. Right, where are we? It'll do. Okay, and let me see very quickly. Just find what is it? How Frank refers to them. Go. Oh no, hang on. Technical specialists. Right, let me see. I bet you I'm not going to find this here. Bear with me a second. Something to do with Fremen. Still suits the ultimate survival tool clothing system. I think it's somewhere around here, is it? Let me see. No, I'm not finding it. I don't want to waste your time, guys. I'll have a look at for it some other time. I think it's a quotation somewhere in my PhD, but it's a particular phrase, and it's to do with their specialism in the tools that they create. And yeah, they're absolutely dependent on them as well. From technology seems like Wakanda. Now that's Black Panther, isn't it? Is that right? Black Panther, the Marvel film. I think have I seen that? Wakanda. I know everybody. How out of touch am I? Hang on. It is Black Panther, right? Wakanda. That's an upcoming film. Did I see that? I don't think. I think I see. I think I saw a part of it, so I can't really comment. To be honest with you, um, Anka, sorry about that. I get what you mean. I suppose it's there must be something similar, I suppose, but it's a kind of like African utopian, technological utopia, something like that, isn't it? I think. Um, hmm. But yeah, the technology of the film, and I suppose one of the things that it's the form of dependency for them that without the technology you couldn't survive on Arrakis, and we're going to see that in this chapter as well because coming up, I suppose they're going to lose the pack, the Frem kit, and it's Paul's despair at that is we're doomed, we've lost the kit. How are we going to survive on this planet? Hmm. How direct his thinking. So here we go for the landing. Um, they glided lower, lower. There came a rushing sense of motion to their passage, blurred shadows of dunes, rocks lifting like islands. The Thopter touched a dune top with a soft lurch, skipped a sand valley, touched another dune. He's killing our speed against the sand, Jessica thought, and permitted herself to admire his competence. Brace yourself, Paul warned. Um, so he pulls back on the wing brakes, gently at first, then harder and harder, and feels them cup up in the air. Aspect ratio is dropping faster and faster. The wind screamed through the lap coverts and primaries of the wings leaves. So we're told abruptly, faintest lurch of warning. Let me see, hang on, have I lost my place again here? The left wing is wrecked by the storm. Let me see, hang on, that's not flowing. 15, I've lost the number. Where are you, number 16? Sorry, here we go. So abruptly, with the faintest lurch warning, the left wing, wakened by the storm, twisted upward and in, slamming across the side of the Thopter. The craft skidded across, a dune top twisting to the left. It tumbled down the opposite face to bury its nose in the next dune amid a cascade of sand. They lay stopped on the broken wing side, the right wing pointing to the stars. So, very quickly, I just sort of wanted to point out a couple of things. We have a kind of this chapter is going to sort of end with the review of the hand and the right, and we've talked about the imagery of the hand with Paul, both the right hand and the left hand, and here we have kind of Paul in flight, if you like, and again we kind of have a similar thing. I just thought there was something kind of metaphorically going on here with the left wing and the right wing, if you see what I mean. I just thought I'd point it out now, because we're going to get to the review, this consideration of the hand, if you see what I mean. And I just thought also about the damage, from the there is residual pain left over for Paul, of course, from the Gom Jabbar. But often the way he considers his hands, the left hand and the right hand, if you like, here we just have that the left hand has been damaged. Sorry, the left wing of his ornithopter's down, the right one points towards the stars. And I thought there's something working there. And usually these things that Frank works with like this tend to go across chapters, if you see what I mean, Arthur C. Clarke's adage about advanced technology appearing magical springs to mind. Yeah, and I can't remember the exact quote. Any technology sufficiently advanced to another culture would appear as magic. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that's happened historically. Anyway, it's it is a fact. Sometimes parts of human civilizations advance a lot quicker than others. And it just depends on what where you're talking about. It's interesting actually. Doug, what do you think Geld know the real counter Fremen and Desert Part as they have control of the satellites? That's a really good question. So the point about how would we put it? I suppose the whole point about the Fremen bribe is to keep satellites out of the skies. So I think that includes the guild, if you see what I mean. And I suppose maybe at the point, it's one of those things where you have to wonder, well, at what point did the Fremen make a deal with the guild, and it's probably post arrival of Pardo Kynes, if you see what I mean. But the point is that it's such a massive amount of melange that the guild aren't likely to yeah, great. That it's a win-win-win for them as far as, well, as far as they think, I suppose. But in terms of, they get massive amounts of melange and they don't have to do really anything. We don't have to put a satellite there. We don't have to maintain it or run it or do anything. But I would say quite possibly. But if there was a point where, if we think about the botanical testing station period, etc., that there were satellites above it, then they probably would have information between, from a point where they did have, I suppose. But between their satellites and prescience, it's a good bit. Yeah, you see, that's the other thing. They do have a reasonable amount of prescience, and in terms of, I suppose, what goes on in terms of the Arrakis affair, I think the guild, in terms of what they've seen, kind of want to just, they're almost neutral in a way, that they can't really be. I think something about the nexus to them is it appears that they can't act or something too well, and I think they know it's bad for them. But yeah, I'd say so. It also depends on population, I suppose. You get the idea that Arrakis is quite a small planet. But yeah, that you wouldn't be able to take sort of any sort of real census of people, and certainly the way the communities within the Fremen live. I don't know. It's an interesting question, and it's one of those things that you imagine there must be a level of, considering the universe, Ankit and Carlos, considering this universe, I would imagine that there must be, even within the guild, I suppose, a certain amount of intrigue about it, if you see what I mean. But it also might be simply it's so financially good for them that they don't want to risk it. It is interesting. Yeah. And I said, yeah, again, groups with sort of degrees of prescience, etc. Really, as you'd imagine that the guild should know a fair bit about it. And I think Raban has a pretty. It's a bit like, if we think about it, the Atreides kind of think, what if there's a whole lot of these guys? And Raban seems to be on the same line, I think, as when he's talking to the Baron. Raban's just generally going out. I'm pretty sure they're more dangerous than you think, and there's a lot more of them. I'm pretty sure. So it's maybe that it's a secret that's maybe running out of time anyway. Secrets are hard to keep, aren't they? Excuse me. There's Joseph Smith. So Joseph Smith saying, so happy to see it. It's good to see you all yourselves, guys. It's really good to have you back, actually, and to have this kind of interaction really makes the book club go well. And as I said, it's we were talking about everybody knows something you don't. If you see what I mean earlier, it's good that we everybody can. There's so much ways that other people contribute to this in terms of linguistically, culturally, how you read the book, what you get out of it. It's great, I think it's important because it's the only planet to have spice. Yeah, I don't know. It is one of those things, and it seems to be that when everybody else is kind of trading, stockpiling, hoarding, dealing in stocks, and what spice equates to is solaris. Really, it equates to wealth, money. And in a sense, I think it's one of those where it's a commodity for the Fremen. It's in their food, their drink, their water. It's like it's almost like the concept that, I don't know. It probably doesn't mean as much to them, if you see what I mean. I used to think about if we chat about sometimes the ancient Irish are quite interesting if you want to talk about gold, and the idea that make your cups, your plates, your forks, your knives, your brooches, everything out of gold, because it's your common metal, and that you don't actually value it as much as other cultures. I suppose in that sense, it's more like your lesser metals, if you like, if you know what I mean. But no, I mean, it's definitely important, and I think it's part of the political intrigue and the whole. We have to understand that, as we've sort of talked about it, that we have a very we can use a few different words if we like. We could use Machiavellian, We could use it. It's a very Machiavellian universe. It's a very Byzantine universe, if you like. And Herbert would go with this as a Byzantine intrigue. So the fact that there's all sorts of machinations going on behind the scenes, um, double talk, and even false assumptions and misinformation. So it's probably there's probably what they know, what they think they know. A bit like the truth, isn't it? Your version, my version, and then there's the actual truth, that kind of thing. But with the amount of subterfuge and Dune, I bet they know something. Yeah, you see what I mean? And it's how that it's you also get get the idea that the Harkonnens try to plant spies within the guild bank, and all of this kind of thing. Um, it's full of spies, subterfuge, spy networks, assassins. It's pretty dangerous universe, but in terms of its economy, it is very interesting. Melange seems to be set at the top of a pyramid, and then other planets tend to make they tend to trade. Other houses of the Landsrod tend to trade, and I suppose the natural resources of their planets. But ultimately, um, it's how Melange equates to wealth, and wealth equals Solaris, I think. And it's the wealth uh, that the Baron has generated from stockpiling Melange and selling it at the right to get the money to pay for the guild to this outrageous price, you see. And you also get the sense, by the way, of course, the whole point about that is that if the guild don't want something to happen militarily, then all they have to do is set the price outside of the reach of an individual house. And I think probably if you think about it in terms of Dune, who's getting all House Harkonnen's wealth? It's the guild. If you see what I mean, they've set such a high price. But I would argue that they must understand that it's within House Harkonnen's ability, um, because it is. If you see what I mean, to launch this attack on Arrakis, and also that they must have again, they don't want the planet blown to bits, do they? It's of such importance, But it's also that allegory for oil. Look at the situation we're in at the minute. With I suppose I'm a Northern Ireland guy, so I'm at the very western edge of Europe. And we have the mainland Britain between us and the continental Europe and Asia, if you see what I mean. But what we call hydraulic despotism, if you look at my ecology chapter way back, whenever I did this, the Gazprom oil pipeline, etc., is the main example we gave of hydraulic despotism. What Frank Herbert's talking about. I think I was back in 2006. We've got the same thing now with Russia withholding oil. It's like arguably, if you were Ukraine, the smartest move that you could make would be to destroy those pipelines. But it would force Russia to escalate the war, I think, badly. It's a very odd situation at the minute, isn't it? And of course, the global economic market is a global market now. It's everything affects everybody, I think. Any thoughts on who originally seeded Arrakis with the worms in the first place? I've no idea about how Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson go about this. I understand there's all sorts of prequels. I actually can't believe the title. The title of the newest Dune book that they've brought out. It's the one title that I thought they wouldn't ever go for, which is Sands of Dune. Europe needs Russia gas more than Russia needs the sea. Yeah, that's the problem. They really do. They're dependent. That is it. They're dependent on it. And at the minute, it's we're in the summer. And winter can be pretty harsh in certain countries in Europe. It can be pretty harsh here. To be honest, Northern Ireland's a subarctic country. More than Russia needs to sell. Yeah, I don't know. I think Russia's economy is in big trouble, and I think partly, I think a lot of its economic value has kind of been siphoned off into the hands of oligarchs. So I do believe there's Russian troops out there with, not that I'm particularly sympathetic to them, but I think their rations are like years and years out of date and stuff like this. It's where all the money been going. And again, at the end of the day, it's about money, isn't it? Ultimately, it's bizarre. I've often said that whenever we're talking about Denis Villeneuve's Dune arriving, And the main thing that I was quite myself personally a little bit maybe too optimistic and too excited about it, but I actually thought it was timely. That was the thing that I kept saying in terms of its ecological message, the hydraulic despotism, this kind of thing. I absolutely and having very dodgy military or political leaders. I thought June's arrival again to a new generation is extremely timely. I suppose it's part of it's the ecological side of it that it's been left out. It's left me a wee bit gutted, but other we've yet to see with part two, I suppose, and I will still hold judgment on it until we see it, you know. But there we go. So the ornithopter's down, and as I said, we have that wee chat about the right wing and the left wing being damaged. And of course, they need to get going, don't they? Because they've hit the ground, and there'll be a worm on the way. One of their nice friends, the worm. So let's see where we're at here. So so Paul jerks off the safety harness, hurls himself upwards across his mother, wrenches the doors open, sand pours into the cabin. There's the dry smell of burnt flint. We're getting the up close and personal of Arrakis here. Grabs the pack from the rear, sees his mother is free from the harness, and she steps out of the metal skin. And Paul follows, dragging the pack. And there's another wee thing here about the metal skin there, and of course there's a lot. If you consider the still suit as a second skin, and ultimately what Leto the Second does with the sand trout, absorbing, putting the silica all over his body, this kind of thing, this symbiosis. There's an interesting little paper which is all about it's called the Muad'Dib of Leto the Second. It's really about him, and I talk about it in the videos. But it's all to do with this kind of psychological viewpoint of second skins, if you like. It's quite interesting. So she steps out of this metal skin, and Paul follows, dragging the pack. And Paul's sort of almost schoolboy nonchalance with this pack, I think, is a bit funny and will cause a problem later. Run, he ordered. Off they go. So he points up to the dune face and beyond, and they can see a rock tower undercut by sandblast winds. And Jessica and Paul leap off the thopter and they run for it. Paul's panting progress behind. They come out on a sand ridge that curves towards the rocks. And Paul shouts to follow the ridge. It'll be faster. So they slug towards the rocks, blah, 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 sand gripping their feet. And here we go. Here's the one, a new sound. So sounds are, I suppose, announcing themselves here. Impresses itself upon them, a muted whisper and abrasive slithering. What have we got? Sorry, hang on. Hello, Holly. Big German Shepherd's just come in. She's opening the doors herself. You all right, big love? How you doing? Oh, take a seat. Hello. And I've got Bonnie sleeping down here. You all right, big girl? Not a great day, is it? There we go. So, yeah, right. Hello. Let me just find my place here. So, worm, Paul said. It grew louder. Faster. Paul gasped. So here we go. Our worm's turning up. The first rock shingle, like a beach slanting from the sand, lay no more than 10 meters ahead when they heard the metal crunch and shatter behind them. And Paul shifts his pack onto his right arm, holding it by the straps. Slapped his side as he ran. He takes his mother's arm with the other hand, and they scramble onto the lifting rock, up a pebble-littered surface and through a twisted wind-carved tunnel. And beneath came dry and breath came dry, and grasping in their throats. And of course, Jessica, I can't run any further. So again, we're pushing this, each little thing pushing the action further. And we get them stopping. Paul stopped, pressed her into a gut of rock, turned and looked down onto the desert. And here we go. This is his point of view of a mound in motion ran parallel to their rock island. Moonlit ripples, sand waves, a cresting burrow almost level with Paul's eyes is about a kilometer away. The flattened dunes on its track curved once, a short loop, crossing the desert where the thopter was. where the worm had been, no sign of the aircraft. And again, there's almost another little allusion to the litany here, I think. And so this burrow mound, as it's described, heads outwards into the desert and course back across its path. And I like this word here, questing. I thought it's quite an interesting wee word there, just questing. Wow, why that word? Questing, off in search of something else, And of course, we keep getting this sort of description, often referred to, described in relation to size of spaceships, I suppose. But in this case, it's bigger than a guild spaceship, says Paul. I was told worms grew large in the deep desert, but I didn't realize how big, And of course, Jessica, nor I, And again, these short little choppy sentences that just keep driving the action along. But here we go. I suppose we're coming up to what we were talking about earlier in terms of survival. Again, the thing turned away from the rock, sped now with a curving track towards the horizon. They listened until the sound of its passage was lost in gentle sand stirrings around them. And again, we get that sort of contrast with all the noises and the crunches and shatters that once the worm is away, it's gentle sand stirrings around them. Kind of almost reminds you of the end of Ozymandias, isn't it? The poem by Shelley. So Paul took a deep breath, looked up at the moon frosted, and Herbert likes the moon with frosting. It seems it's a term he uses a lot. He looked up at the moon-frosted escarpment and quoted from the Kitab al-Ibar: "Travel by night and rest in black shade through the day." He looked at his mother. "We still have a few hours of night. Can you go?" Now, the Kitab al-Ibar I have here is the Book of Lessons. And let me see. Just a wee quick nosy online, and I'm sure you can find out more about this, is a 14th century book by the Arab sociologist and historian Ibn Khaldun, which is a very interesting Arab name because it sounds like a very Irish name, I thought. Khaldun's, and for example, so Ibn Khaldun, providing pronouncing it that correctly, and this is a real book. The book in this case is meant to be, as far as I know, a history of the Berbers. But I think it's also a universal history, I think, of some of the Arab peoples. I think peoples of Northwest Africa. So there we go. That's quite interesting. So the Kitab al-Ibir. I wonder, that's actually what it is in real life. I wonder, do we have let's just check the terminology of the Imperium. And in this case, the Kitab al-Ibar is in the terminology of the Imperium, is the combined survival handbook and religious manual developed by the Fremen on Arrakis. There we go. Then we have another one, which is the book of let me see. There's another one, I think, was it the Book of the Friendly Desert or something like that? And I thought maybe it's the same book. Must have a wee look at that again. Anyway, there we go. So let's see, where are we? Yes, he's quoting from the Kitab al-Ibar. Yes, so common sense here. Travel in the desert, travel at night when it's cooler, rest in the black shade throughout the day. Oh, that's right, that's our Holly with her new toy octopus. I hope that's not coming in through too loud, folks. I'm hoping you're all still there. Actually, there you go. I'm still doing a fair bit of gabbing. I think we're okay. Right. That's a good Holly. Right, okie dokie. Let's see where we are now. Number 23. Right. So, right. Travel by night and rest in black shade throughout the day. He looked at his mother. "We still have a few hours of night. Can you go on?" And Jessica replies, "In a moment." So Paul steps out onto the rock shingle, shoulders the pack, adjusts the straps, and stands for a moment, his paracompass in hand. And the paracompass is going to be quite an important piece of kit here. It's going to have, obviously, it seems to have more than one use, the way it's designed. So whenever you're ready, he said, and Jessica feels her strength returns. Which direction? They're going to follow where this ridge leads, Paul says, deep into the desert. Jessica says, "Yes, the Fremen desert," he whispered, and they paused. And we have a vision. Right, let's have a wee look. And again, I suppose maybe that this is these wee moments of silence in between. So, and he paused, shaken by the remembered high relief imagery of a prescient vision he had experienced on Caladan. He had seen this desert, but the set of the vision had been subtly different, like an optical image that had disappeared into his consciousness, been absorbed by memory, and now failed of perfect registry when projected onto the real scene. The vision appeared to have shifted and approached him from a different angle while he remained motionless. Sorry, it's very, very background noisy, loud here. The dogs are drinking and playing with toys, etc. Hope it's not too bothersome. I kept saying, sorry, Doc, I have to go. It's 3:30 a.m. in India. I have a suggestion. We June community can connect on some conference call and can share best June moments. So yeah, I'd love to do something like that. I've actually I'm working on something like that, Anka, as well. But thank you very much for joining us for India. No problem at all. It's pretty late, so thank you very much for joining and your contribution. We'll catch you another time, hopefully. And I've got a Zoom thing. I must try and set something up, but it's just always trying to find the time, I think. So thank you very much for joining us. Take it easy. Let's see. So yeah, this vision. So he's seen this vision. He's seen all of this before, but it's described as he remembers the high relief imagery of a prescient vision he'd experienced on Caladan. He'd seen this desert, but the set of the desert is subtly different. There's something, it's a slightly different future, isn't it? It's not the same one he'd experienced, like an optical image that had disappeared into his consciousness, been absorbed by his memory, but now failed of perfect registry when projected onto the real scene. So it's almost as if you could take his prescient vision and overlap it onto the reality. It's very similar, but there's something not quite right about it. The vision appeared to have shifted and approached him from a different angle while he remained motionless. Idaho, and here's the difference, one of the differences anyway. Idaho was with us in this vision. He remembered, but now Idaho is dead. So again, this is quite important, I suppose, because if we look back, Paul's had prescient visions that kind of are connecting to points in the future where he's going, oh, I remember I had a vision about this kind of thing. Here we have one of these visions and it's not come true. And it's slightly close. But yeah, possibly we're in the same place. We've crashed the thoughter, etc. But when I had this vision on Caladan, Idaho was with us. He was alive. That's what's different here. It's changed for him. So Idaho's titty bread, as they would say in this country. He's dead. Potato bread. And so again, it lets us know that Paul's prescience is not complete. It's not 100%, and it's not necessarily completely accurate, at least anyway, prior to this point. And it is taking a memory, I suppose, from we could say argue it's a prescient memory now, and overlaying it onto the reality of what he's experiencing and seeing that it's so close, but it is different. And if I'm truly prescient, surely that shouldn't be the case. Excuse me one wee second, folks. Just let Miss Bo Whiffany out here. Do you want to go out, me love? There you go. Off you go. Say hello to the others. That's a girl. There you are. Right. Doggy's gone. Sorry, they're up and down and up and down. There we go. Apologies about that, folks. We have, as I said, that's why we call this the doghouse. We have doggies coming and going, and they're generally pretty well behaved, but they're being a bit just background noisy. I think, if you know what I mean tonight. Now, where were we? So Idaho's not here. So it is. I suppose it is important that Paul's, from his point of view, he's not all seeing, all dancing. He's not, I suppose, omniscient in that sense. He doesn't know everything. He's not seeing it before it happens. There are differences. There are changes within variation of what happens. And again, it's just that there was a possible future where Idaho would have been here, but he's not. And I think it's just an interesting little point where we're learning a few, I suppose, about the limitations of Paul. And the fact that Paul is, in fact, I'll put it this way, guys. I think this is the really important chapter in terms of what Frank Herbert is trying to present to you in terms of his argument about a hero. Because wow, this kid's good, isn't he? He's really good, but he's going to mess up here, and he does mess up. And ultimately, I suppose that the argument about Paul Atreides as a dangerous hero is that whenever you take someone who's so far above the average man, that we all make mistakes, that surely that if that person is amplified as a human being in many, many ways, then their mistakes must also be amplified. And I think that the example in this chapter is to do with Jessica getting, is to do with this pack that he's carrying about. It's almost like a schoolboy's backpack in a sense, or almost the way that he handles it, I think. Um, but his decision here is going to, it's actually, I don't know what you think about this, but it's actually not a major mess up at all. It's just a it's just a it's a nothing of a mistake, really. But the consequences of it are quite severe. And I think that that's a good example of Paul doing almost nothing wrong, but it has consequences that are almost fatal. And in a sense that and it is a small thing. Excuse me. But I said that that's the idea about a hero like Paul. That these larger than life heroes who are, their mistakes will be larger than life too. They'll be amplified. So let's see. 26. Where are we at? My number 26. So on the go from Idaho's not there anymore. Do you see a way to go? Jessica asked, mistaking his hesitation. And by the way, I think it's these little moments that's what we talk about, the epithet, the epigram at the start of the chapter in terms of what it's about, silence. It's these little moments of silence in the book that I think it's referring to. Certainly pointing us towards. So he settled. No, oh, sorry. Do you see a way to go? Jessica asked, mistaking his hesitation. No, he said, but we'll go anyway. Hello, Bonnie. So he settled his shoulders more firmly in the pack, struck out up a sand-carved channel in the rock, and the channel opened onto a moonlit floor of rock with benched ledges climbing away to the south. So Paul heads for the first ledge, and Jessica follows. Now, Jessica notes. Where are we? So we go again over to Jessica's sort of point of view. She notes presently how the passage becomes a matter of the immediate and particular. Sand pockets between rocks where their steps were slowed, the wind-carved ridge that cut their hands, the obstruction that forced a choice, go over or around. The terrain enforced its own rhythms. Spoke only when necessary, then with hoarse voices of their exertion. Spoke, careful here, this ledge is slippery with sand. Watch, don't hit your head in an overhang. Stay below this ridge. Moons, let's see, moons, oh, hang on, can't read my own handwriting again. My handwriting's appalling, folks. Moons at our backs, and I'd show our movement, and it'd show our movement to anyone out there. So kind of little bits of advice as they go. And it's this kind of idea that the map is not the territory again, which is a fundamental with the general semantics ideas. So yeah, the territory, the terrain enforces its own rhythms, and the various things that occur, the different types of terrain that they meet, and the various problems that it creates. So it's a kind of, again, on we go them, it's a good way of sort of stretching out the fact that we're moving quite quickly, quite rapidly in this chapter. So let's see. They stop. Where are we? Paul stopped in a bright of rock, leaned the pack against a narrow ledge. Jessica leans beside him, thankful for a moment of rest. She heard Paul pulling out a stillsuit tube, and she sipped at her own reclaimed water. And I've just put that was another little note about being reborn. Previously, she'd said about until she drank the water. I think she's already done that at this point, but just that was a symbolic of her rebirth. It tasted brackish. Maybe she hasn't actually. Maybe this is the moment. I might have mixed that up. But I've just put reborn. But she sipped her own reclaimed water, and it tasted brackish. Brackish is, I adjective salty, if you like, not slightly salty, I suppose. Slightly salty water is brackish. Uh, how would you put that? It's not fresh water, obviously, but it's not full on seawater. It's kind of somewhere in between, slightly salty water, but I wouldn't call it brine. Maybe. I don't know. There we go. That's what brackish means. She remembered, and again we get this another memory. And of course, Herbert often gives us the two characters at any given time to sort of give us a compare and contrast, and particularly with his Jungian mandalas. And of course, Paul and Jessica are part of a syzygy as well, a pairing, if you like, mother and son. But pretty much probably sun and moon. There's all sorts of associations that you can run with these two characters here. But we've just had Paul's prescient vision, which again, it was an experience that he had on Caladan. Now we have Jessica going to Caladan. Again, she remembers the waters of Caladan. A tall fountain enclosing a curve of sky, such a richness of moisture that it hadn't been noticed for itself, only for its shape or its reflection or its sound as she stopped by it. To stop, she thought, to rest, truly rest. That's mercy. And it occurs to her that mercy is the ability to stop, if only for a moment. There is no mercy where there could be no stopping. I would run that one through the court of Diogenes, folks, if you see what I mean. Mercy occurs when you have the ability to stop something only for a moment. I would argue that it could work the other way. Mercy would be to continue helping someone breathe, for example, not stopping their breathing. I don't know. It's an absolute almost, isn't it? To stop, if only for a minute. To do this that's what mercy is. I don't think it's that simple. The absolute here is that there's no mercy where there could be no stopping. And that's what I don't agree with. But yes, in terms of what Herbert's trying to sort of subtly teach is, if you like, the odd axiom or maxim gets through. But in this sense, yeah, just from the character's point of view, it would be an absolute mercy just to stop for a moment. But they can't stop. They've got to keep going. So Paul pushed away from the rock ledge, turned and climbed over a sloping surface, and Jessica follows with a sigh. So they slide down a wide shelf around a rock face. There's quite a bit of this, I suppose, and they fall into a disjointed rhythm of movement across this broken land. And I suppose that's what they really want, to be disjointed, that they are out of rhythm in that sense. And we get the whole thing about unnatural rhythms, if you like, attracting worms. So again, really our immersion in Arrakis is going on here in this chapter. We get some more of Jessica's thoughts. She felt that the night was dominated by degrees of smallness in substances beneath their feet and hands. Boulders or pea gravel or flaked rock or pea sand or sand itself or grit or dust or gossamer powder. And so we're getting all these all the different kind of substances, material, if you like, make up the desert. Different types of rocks, pebbles, gravel, etc. Different types of sand, grit, dust, fines, I suppose I was expecting there, gossamer powder. And again, we get a little bit about each one of these and their effect, if you like, in terms of we were talking about the technology, etc., that the Fremen rely on. All machines fail. Well, if you're in your survival suit and you're out in Arrakis, here's what each of these different things do. So the gossamer powder, it clogs your nose filters. It has to be blown out, probably like getting the tube in London. All the soot gets up your nose. Pea sand and pea gravel rolled on hard surfaces and could spill the unwary, like possibly like walking on ball bearings, this kind of thing. Rock flakes cut you. damage your still suit, etc. And the ever-present, the omnipresent sand patches dragged against their feet. So again, just little examples. Jessica's thoughts on this, you know, and again, really her feelings on this, that the night's dominated by degrees of smallness in substances beneath the, everything that they do as they go about is dominated by all these different types of sand and grit and boulder, rocks, etc., etc. And each one brings its own kind of unique problems, I suppose. Paul stops abruptly upon a rock shelf and he steadies Jessica as she kind of stumbles into him. It's quite comic, I thought. He points off to the left, and atop a cliff, we're told the desert stretched out like a static ocean. 200 meters below, full of moon-silvered waves, shadows of angles that lapsed into curves, and in the distance, grey blur of another escarpment. So here we go. This is the bit where they get to their problem, I suppose. We have open desert, as Jessica tells us, and Paul points out that it is a wide place to cross. Even though we're told, again, his voice is muffled by the filter trap across the face. A wide place to cross. Ooh. Doggies are barking outside. So again, we get Jessica glancing from left to right, nothing but sand below. And Paul, again, just these point of views. Paul stares straight ahead across the open dunes, watches the movement of shadows in the moon's passage. The distance from where they're at now to where they want to get to next, 3 to 4 kilometers across. Jessica, here, our next problem, worms. Sure to be, says Paul. And this focuses Jessica. Jessica focuses on her weariness, her muscle ache, and it dulled her senses. Shall we rest and eat? She asks. So, yeah, pretty much this is what they're going to do. Paul unpacks, leans against the pack, and Jessica descends to the rock below and next to him. So Paul starts rummaging in his pack, and as she settles, here you go, he says, and he gives Jessica 2 energy capsules, and Jessica notes that his hand feels dry in her palm. Jessica swallows these tablets with a grudging spit of her water. And we're going a little bit of water discipline here, if you, as we go. Give me a wee second, folks. I'm going to quickly hit mute and blow my nose. 1 second. There we go. Sorry about that. Had a bit of a tickly nose there. So I personally think this is possibly one of the Atreides problems here. And as we've seen how drugged up Leto was, Leto's reliance, and seemingly a lot of the Atreides staff's reliance on energy pills or perk pills or whatever. But here we go again. He gives Jessica 2 energy capsules. It's more drugs. And again, she swallows them with a grudging spit of her water, and we get a little bit of a lesson from Paul here. And this is again, our immersion in Arrakis here. Got a still sit, should we drink or what? Etc. This kind of thing. And simply, here we go. Drink all your water, Paul said. And I quite like this bit. Axiom. Yeah. The best place to conserve your water is in your body. It keeps your energy up. You're stronger. Trust your still suit. And again, she obeyed. So water, energy. Energy is being mentioned a fair bit here, actually, in this chapter. We get it again. We've had it again, blue within blue within blue, plans within plans within plans. We'll have energy mentioned for the 3rd time here and again, we say. So she obeys and drains the catch pocket. So drink all your water and feels her energy return. And again, in the moments of silence, that the epigraph that we had at the beginning of the chapter, her thoughts, how peaceful it is here in this moment of tiredness. And she recalls once hearing the minstrel warrior Gurney Halleck say, better a dry morsel and quietness than a house full of sacrifice and strife. So Jessica repeats the quotation to Paul, And Paul immediately goes, that was Gurney, he says. So, I'll read that again. That was Gurney. He said, I did that too upbeat there, didn't I? Because Paul's tone is caught by Jessica, and the way he speaks as if somebody's dead. And Jessica's thoughts, and poor Gurney might well be dead. And she thinks that the Atreides forces, probably they're all dead, captured, or else probably lost like themselves in this waterless wilderness. And Paul tells us that Gurney always had the right quotation, I can hear him now. And I will make the rivers dry and sell the land into the hand of the wicked, and I will make the land waste and all that is therein by the hand of strangers. Now, we've had it. Just thought I'd get through those couple of quotations, and we can have a wee chat about them. And I'll take some fluids here. So the first one of those quotations from Gurney. First of all, interestingly enough, I think Gurney's previously described as a troubadour, where here he's a minstrel. So, in some senses, they're not synonyms, but we might as well consider them in modern language to be so. But I'd say a troubadour is a very specific thing. So the quote that Jessica thinks of, better a dry morsel and quietness than a house full of sacrifice and strife, is actually a quotation from the Old Testament's Proverbs 17:1. The actual quotation then, depending on your translation, we'll go with this one, is that better is a dry morsel in quietness than a house full of feasting and strife. So again, you can see this will be a quote from the Orange Catholic Bible in the Dune universe. Herbert's taken a quotation from Proverbs and pretty much he's changed one word, feasting, to sacrifice. So it's Gurney's quotation, better a dry morsel of quietness than a house full of sacrifice and strife. The original biblical quotation, than a house full of feasting and strife. Now, the other quotation that Paul comes up with here, Gurney's version again would probably quoting the Orange Catholic Bible. I will make the rivers dry and sell the land into the hand of the wicked, and I will make the land waste and all that is therein by the hand of strangers. This is actually a quotation from Ezekiel 30:12. And to give you the proper quotation, and I will make the rivers dry and sell the land into the hand of the wicked, and I will make the land waste and all that is therein by the hand of strangers. I, the Lord, have spoken. So that's Ezekiel 30:12. So Ezekiel, what would he be? I think the book of Ezekiel is attributed to Ezekiel, isn't it? So it's probably 7th or 6th century Hebrew prophet. And the book of Proverbs is another book. We've talked about this before with Ecclesiastes, is another book attributed to Solomon. This is quite interesting stuff, actually. There we go. Love stuff like that. So also, just to let you know, for anybody who's not too sure, so Paul's language here is a bit, and just to backtrack, the way he explains it, drink all of your water, and then he just goes, axiom. Oh, why do I keep doing that? I don't know. Axiom, best place to conserve your water is in your body. Keep your energy up. You're stronger. Test yourself. So for those who are not too sure, as you know, I'm a classicist. So an axiom is a different thing to different people. So within the world of logic, which is also my world, I suppose, an axiom is an assumption that is to be taken to be true as a basis for a starting point to make to reason or make an argument. Within the classical world, I suppose, axioms are, I suppose we go with something it's to do with the word worthiness. That which is worthy or fits its purpose, something that is self-evidently true. Okay, that's again what I would. So that's probably the correct use of the axiom here. Though I'd say arguably you could use the other one. So just to let you know a wee bit, if you're interested in such things, axioin is to deem something worthy. For example, as the verb in Greek, axios would be something in balance. For those of you who are interested in studying ethics, morality, this kind of thing, then axiology is the study of worthiness, if you like, right and wrong, good and evil, and is fundamentally a part of attached to, I suppose, the ideas of politics, and that what is politics is the science of the happiness of man, what is good for man, a eudaimonia. But in this sense, axiology, if you like, is it's if before you can say something's bad, oh, that's bad. How do you know it's bad? Who told you it was bad? Did you bother to do the work yourself? Have you determined that this thing is a benefit or a hazard to mankind? Just because someone says something's bad doesn't mean it's the case. So, arguably, if you understand the term value judgments that's used within Dune a lot, then you can argue that that's what axiology is. It's the study of value judgments. Is something worthy? Is something good? Is something bad? That kind of thing. Because before you can really engage in morality, I suppose, or ethics, uh, before I suppose take Hitler. Hitler's bad, okay, but why is he bad? And that why is that behavior bad? At some point, you have to analyze that and go, okay, that's why it's bad, and therefore your sense of right and wrong. A lot of us get it from religion, etc. When we're young, we're told that's right, that's wrong. And I suppose it's not always the case. It's often far from the case, I suppose. So that's just in terms of Paul's language there, axioms. Yeah, quite an interesting little bunch of quotations there. As I said, it's always the wee bits between the action, I think, that are more interesting in Dune. So there we go. And more to do with life on the desert, basically. Get all your water into your body, trust your still suit. And ultimately, I suppose that's what Ankit was talking about earlier. I think in terms of technology, was it Ankit? I think, and I think Chris had talked about, I suppose, even the Arthur C. Clarke thing. But to trust in the technology, I use technology a lot in my work. All tech fails sooner or later. Anything that's made by man will fail. If it's mechanical, it will break down. Need to be replaced or fixed or something, So there we go. Sorry, a wee bit of a stop there. Let's see. 39. Okie dokie. So back with Jessica. Excuse me. And of course, there's a little bit of discussion about Gurney Halleck. I suppose. Well, of course, we know we're going to bump into him again, Andy. That I suppose that Paul's certainty that Idaho is dead here. That sense of Paul's sense of despair, almost, I suppose, that comes along later. But he doesn't really have that. I suppose he talks about Gurney as if he's dead, but we could argue that probably his prescient ability might know that he's not at this point, But that there's also many paths where, that could happen, I suppose. So Jessica closed her eyes. She's moved close to tears by the pathos in Paul's voice. And I think that's interesting because we'll get a little bit of pathos in a wee bit that kind of doesn't really work. Presently, Paul, how do you feel? How do you feel? I suppose is what he asked Jessica, and she recognizes that the question is actually about her pregnancy. She picks it up from his tone, etc. Your sister will not be born for many months, yet I still feel physically adequate. That's how she puts it. Again, this shift to her thoughts, which is quite a wee sort of motif with these two characters. I think Herbert likes to move in and around their point of views, if you like what I mean, move back and forward. How stiffly formal I speak to my own son. Oh gosh. And then because we're told it's the Bene Gesserit way to seek within for an answer to such an oddity, she searches for the source of this formality, if you like. Why? How stiffly formal I speak to my own son. This is her own thoughts. I suppose what she has said, just backtracking a wee bit, your sister won't be born for many months yet. I still feel physically adequate. It's not exactly, it doesn't come across as a conversation that a mother and son would have. It certainly doesn't sound like naturalistic language. And again, I suppose that's the character providing that. That feels a bit weird, but her questioning it for us, how stiffly formal I speak to my own son. Why formality? I suppose it's interesting. It depends on how you use formality in your speaking. Here's the answer: fear. I'm afraid of my son. I fear his strangeness. I fear what he may see ahead of us, what he may tell me. And so essentially, that is Jessica fearing Paul's prescience and being the fear seems to be there, that a fear of foreknowledge, of prescience itself, of knowing the future, of possibly knowing something bad that Paul might tell her. Um, Within that little moment, Paul's not really sort of reacting to her in that sense. It's an internal thing. He has his head down over. Let me see. Sorry, his hood down over his eyes, and as he listens, he hears so picking up again these minutiae, these details of little things about them, the bug hustling sounds of the night. Insects, I've probably gone with that. His lungs charged with his own silence. His nose itched, rubbed it, removed the filter. Grew conscious of the rich smell of cinnamon. There's melange spice nearby, and again, the contrast, I suppose, to the storm, etc. We have this eider wind that we're told, like eider down pillows, etc. I often describe the sky around here as a bit like an eider down quilt at certain times of the year. The clouds here in Northern Ireland, right at the north coast, become very odd, and a particular shade of blue within the sky. And it's something that I think is quite unique to here, but I've talked to people about it before. I've always called it, it's a bit like my granny's eider down quilt. It reminds me of that, I suppose. But here we have the eider wind feathering, gently caressing Paul's cheeks. It ruffled the folds of his burnous. For those who don't know, a burnous is a long, loose, hooded cloak worn traditionally by the Berbers and other Maghrebi men. That's in the northwestern region of Africa. There you go. Again, has that got a? That's what it is in real life. Let's just check the. Probably should have done this, shouldn't I? But it's always good to look up the terminology of the Imperium. Let's see. A burnous is not there, I don't think. Burnous. What's the birthday? Obviously, you know that one. No, it's not there. So if anyone's not sure, that's one of those terms. A burnous is a long, loose, hooded cloak worn by Berbers and other Maghrebi men. I think it's. I think I was having a wee quick read about it, and I think generally a lot of them used to be traditionally white. I think again, Berbers are fascinating people. There's some really good photographs of the Berbers from kind of like the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, and kind of around, I suppose, that era. And they're certainly an impressive looking people, I have to say. There's a thing on here in Britain at the minute in terms of, I suppose, old cultures and traditions and stuff. And I was just having a wee quick nosy at it. And it's a sort of horse fair. And if anybody's interested in this, what's called the Appleby Horse Fair in England, thousands of people have descended on this town for for a gypsy festival, as the BBC have put it. But this is the Gypsies and Travellers, and it's some of the photographs are on the BBC. It's a news story today, and I think they're suggesting that it's going to be the last ever Appleby Horse Fair. But some of the pictures are fascinating. Actually, it almost would remind you of the Riders of Rohan, and these people and their affinity for horses, and they're absolutely look like they're having a cracking time. I have to say, gypsies and travellers are not treated very well in Britain or Ireland at all. We're called travellers over here in our community. And they're an interesting bunch, I have to say. But I just caught that in the news today. So just a sort of an old cultural tradition possibly coming to an end. But it looked like they were having a great day. And their horses just looks amazing. It's not kind of the same scale, I think, as maybe I've done it justice as saying the Riders of Rohan, but it's certainly a culture that's very immersed in their an equine culture, shall we call it. Yeah, very interesting. So that's what a burnous is. Sorry, we do get distracted, don't we? But this one is, again, this gentle caress ruffled the folds of his burnous, sorry, the eider wind, feathered, light as a feather. And again, this wind is no threat, not like the storm that they've been through. And already he could sense the difference. I think that's kind of funny because, and I don't know what anybody's opinions are on this, but the difference between the storms on Arrakis, I suppose, that you can experience compared to this gentle caress of a eider down feather. This Coriolis, any major sandstorm on Arrakis where winds across the open flatlands are amplified by the planet's own revolutionary motion to reach up to 700 kilometers per hour, which probably skin you. Compared to this, they're a bit. I suppose it's a bit of a polarized extremes, really, isn't it? You know. But yeah, again, this planet can be deadly, can't it? But you get the sense, especially with Paul talking about our friends, the worms. Really, this planet can be deadly, but it can also be a home. You know, it can be welcoming in some way. Well, if you have the right sensibility about you. So we're told it's going to be dawn soon. And Paul says he thinks there's a safe way to cross the sand, the way the Fremen do it. And Jessica goes, the worms? You know, what are we going to do with these worms? Yeah, if we're to plant a thumper from our Frem kit back in the rocks here, Paul said, keep a worm occupied for a long time. So the plan is to plant it around the rocks, actually, and somewhere where the worm can't get at it easy, should keep it occupied for a while. Jessica glances at the desert ahead. 4 kilometers worth of time, because that's what they need. So perhaps, says Paul, maybe, if we cross making only natural sounds, the kind that won't attract the worms. Again, our immersion in the planet here. Water, we learn drink all your water, travel during the night, in the day, sleep in the black shade where it's cool. We're learning, aren't we? We're getting immersed in Arrakis. We've got to make natural sounds as we cross the desert. We all know the walk without rhythm, you won't attract a worm. This is going this way. So Paul studies again. Here we go. The desert using his prescient memory, questing. And I thought, yeah, it's that same word. We mentioned that word briefly earlier with the worm, didn't we? The worm took off questing, and we get the exact same word of all the words in the English language, questing. So he's questing in his prescient memory, probing the mysterious allusions to thumpers and maker hooks in the Frem kit manual that had come with their escape pack. So the Frem kit manual. He found it odd that all he sensed was a pervasive terror at the thought of worms. The worms. He knew, as though it lay just at the edge of his awareness, that the worms were to be respected and not feared. If it's like he just can't get it, can he? They can be respected, not feared. If what? And the things are in there, I suppose. The things that the mysterious illusions that he's talking to, thumpers we know about, maker hooks, etc. Probably some combination of these is how he can have respect the worm and actually use it, not feared, if you like. Combination of thumper, maker hooks, etc. And he should be able to ride a worm, but it's just out. It's just not there. If you see what I mean. My wife got me coffee ages ago. And thank goodness it's still slightly warm. There we go. Totally forgot about it there. Hope you're all keeping well, folks. If anybody's got any questions, fire away. Very, very dense chapter, this, I have to say. Oh, here we go. Now, let's see. Where are we? So, yeah, Paul's feeling terror. Thought it's odd. Why terror? The worms, he knew, the edge of his awareness, the worms were to be respected, not feared. If something intangible is at the edge of his awareness, but he can't quite get there. Jessica says it has to be sounds without rhythm. Paul's what? It's distracted. Oh, yes. So if we broke our steps, the sand must shift itself down at times. Worms investigate every little sound. We should be fully rested before trying anything. And again, Paul sees the time's passage in the moon shadows. It's the kind of thing he does as the moon goes. He's able to determine the time through it. And it'll be dawn within the hour, we're told. So where will we spend the day? Asks Jessica. Paul says the cliff curves back north over there. Where it's wind cut, that's the windward face, and the crevices there, they're deep ones. So that will give them shade. Had we better get started, says Jessica. Yeah. So rested enough for a climb down. We want to get as close as possible to the desert floor before we camp. And Jessica says that she's rested enough and nods for Paul to lead the way. He hesitates, lifts the pack, and off they go. And again, we're always focusing on this pack. This pack's quite important. We get a little bit of Jessica's thoughts here as down they go. And I suppose this was one of the things I thought was done pretty well in the film, is that I suppose the suspensors and the troops, coming down like that. I thought that was excellent. If only we had suspensors. Okay. It would be a simple matter just to go wee and jump down there, wouldn't it? And of course, this raises the question in her mind. Perhaps suspensors are another thing to avoid in the desert. Maybe they attract worms the same as the shields. And I think I'm not too sure how the answer to that question is, but I think it's a pretty good assumption that the suspensors are use the same technology, don't they? As a shield. So let me just see. Of course, it's all to do with the Holtzman effect, the Holtzman field. Now, the shield is a protective field produced by a Holtzman generator. The field derives from phase 1 of the suspensor nullification effect. So phase 1 of that effect, the suspensor nullification effect, is an effect of the Holtzman field. The suspensor, we're told, is a secondary low drain phase of a Holtzman field generator, nullifies gravity within certain limits prescribed by relative mass and energy consumption. So it is possible that suspensors may not bother worms, but I would say most likely that they would. So it's just a bit of a I wonder, would be suspensors would be handy here? They wouldn't they be so useful? Maybe not based on what shields do. Seems that they could be equally as bad as an idea in the desert. So they head down the shelves of rock and see a fissure, which winds down into a world of deeper and deeper shadows, and the fissure narrows to about 10 meters in width. Can we go down? Says Jessica. I think so, says Paul. Test the service. We can slide down. Now, this is Paul's mistake here. And it's not. We talk about mistakes being amplified. This isn't really a bad mistake. He'll admonish himself for this in a bit. He'll blame himself for it. Not too bad, I think. And I don't think maybe Jessica really gets it. But from our own point of view, he doesn't really do anything wrong and nearly kills his mum. And that is, I think, an example of his mistakes being amplified, the consequences of them being amplified. It's also probably maybe just showing how deadly a planet Arrakis is. But it seems like a wee bit of test the service. We can slide down. Paul slides down onto an almost level floor of packed sand. Of course, sorry, just hang on a second. Careful, says Jessica just before he does this. That's it, really. The place was deep within the rock walls. The sound of sand sliding behind him, and he tries to see up. He's almost knocked over by a cascade, trailed away to silence. So, mother, no answer. Mother. So what he says, we can slide down. And he slides down and hits a flat bit of ground. And at this point where he's hit, he can hear shh, and all of that comes sliding down because of his movements and buries Jessica. Mother, no answer. Mother. So he drops the pack, hurls himself up the slope. And that's his other mistake, isn't it? These two little mistakes. He drops the pack. He doesn't sort of put it somewhere safe or secure it or something like that. He acts quickly, hurls himself up the slope, scrambling digging, throwing sand like a wild man, we're told. Pardon me, mother, mother, where are you? And we have another cascade of sand buries him up to his hips. He wrenches himself out, and we go into his thought process. So he starts to analyze the problem. Here we go. Here's his exact words. She's been caught. His thoughts. Sorry, she's been caught in the sand slide. He thought, buried in it. I must be calm and work this out carefully. She won't smother immediately. She'll compose herself in Bindu suspension to reduce her oxygen needs. She knows I'll dig for her. Right. In the Bene Gesserit way that she had taught him, Paul stilled the savage beating of his heart, set his mind as a blank slate upon which the past few moments could write themselves. So this is him again reviewing the situation. It's a bit like, I suppose, a bit like Jessica's time sense. He's slows his heartbeat, sets his mind, creates it almost like a blank slate, replays the past few moments onto that. Every twist and slide replayed in his memory, moving with interior stateliness that contrasted with the fractional second of real time required for total recall. Let me have a wee look at this. So every partial shift and twist of the slide replayed itself in his memory, moving with an interior stateliness. So moving with an interior stateliness inside that contrasts with the fractional second of real time required for the total recall. So once he has that recall, he's able to sort of move more. It's almost as if he's able to move within his mind calmly, in a kind of almost slowed down way, study the problem. Presently, Paul moved slantwise up the slope, probing cautiously, until he found the wall of the fissure, an outcurve of rock there. So in terms of this, where they've slid down, there is a kind of a fissure, a wall that comes down it, and he's going to use that as a kind of anchor point and a point of reference, almost, if you like, to get Jessica out. So he began to dig, moving the sand with care not to dislodge another slide. A piece of fabric came under his hands. He followed it, found an arm. Gently, he traced the arm, exposed the face. Her face, sorry. Do you hear me? He whispered. No answer. Jessica's limp, and he detects a faint heartbeat. That's the Bindu suspension, he told himself. We'll have a wee chat about that in a bit, I suppose. Bindu. I kind of scribbled this down at the end of this chapter. Here we go. I thought we'd have a wee quick mention about prana and Bindu at the end, but very quickly, just for anybody, Bindu is a Sanskrit word meaning point or dot. The other one we're going to talk about, prana, is also Sanskrit: breath, life force, vital principle, etc. And there's a fair bit to those words, and I suppose well having a wee look at them if you don't understand them up on Wikipedia, etc. So breath, life force, control of your breath, etc. Quite interesting principles. And in this case, Bindu is to do with oh, sorry, I've jumped all the way forward there and lost my page here. Hang on there, run back. We're at number 8, where are we? Bindu suspension. Yeah. In this case, is that what the terminology of the Imperium tells us, that Bindu suspension is a form of catalepsy, I think. Let's find it. Let's see. Bindu, relating to the human nervous system, especially to nerve training, often expressed as Bindu nervature. Bindu suspension, which is what Jessica has here, is, we're told, a special form of catalepsis, which is self-induced. So catalepsy, sleep sort of thing, isn't it? That's one of those things that people used to think were, if you're a vampire, catalepsy would be a condition where you'd probably just collapse, and I think it appear to have like one. Well, in old days, your heartbeat wouldn't be detected by your average doctor, and they'd think you were dead and bury you. One of those, a bit like narcolepsy, I think, in some ways. Probably quite different, but catalepsy. That's an interesting word. Must have a wee. quick look at it. Let's have a look. From Catalan, to seize upon. From the Greek catalepsis. From Catalan, Benin, seize upon. There we go. So yeah, she's in this state, and interestingly, I suppose that there's a key word to get her out of this state. I suppose that Paul knows. So there we go, folks. Sorry, I must have missed that bit out. Let me see. Type of catalepsy. So Paul the Bene Gesserit way. Yeah. Sorry, just must have missed that one line there. There we go. So he digs her out, puts her over the shoulder, and runs as the entire sand slope comes down. He lowers her to the sand and utters the word to bring her out of the catalepsis. Yeah, there we go. I've written that down again. Greek catalepsis, to seize upon. So she awakens slowly and then takes deep breaths. I knew you'd find me, she says. Paul says, rather fatalistically here, the first thing she hears from Paul, might have been kinder if I hadn't. Paul, is her response. That's terrible. He tells her, I've lost the pack. It's buried under 100 tons of sand at least. Everything, Jessica says, spare water, still tent, everything that counts. Paul still has the following devices, I suppose, from the frigate. I still have the following: a para compass, handy, and that's going to save the day, isn't it? Here, knife and binoculars. We can get a good look around the place. We'll die. So grim humor there, I thought, a wee bit despairing, maybe. And of course, at this point, the sun lifts above the horizon. The colors are blinking in the sand. There's a chorus of birds making their songs, and they're hidden in the rocks. Seems almost like hopeful, isn't it? That today's a new day. There's new hope. This kind of thing. And Jessica, her eyes, she sees only despair really in Paul's face, and she decides to hit him with a bit of Bene Gesserit sort yourself pity nonsense out, if you like. How's it put? Let me just bring this over just to read it from the book. Jessica had eyes only for the despair in Paul's face. She edged her voice with scorn, said, "Is this the way you were taught?" And of course, his response, "Don't you understand? Everything we need to survive in this place is under that sand." And of course, she's just having been under that sand. And again, I think that we talked about another rebirth there for Jessica. Sorry, I meant to mention that one. Whenever she was buried and he finds the arm and then the face, etc. I thought that's another sort of being born out, reborn again, symbolically. But of course, she says, you found me. And again, the control of voice here. So we're getting Jessica being subtle, with her voice, knowing how to evoke the right tones, etc. First, the scorn, to cut him out of the self-pity, the self-reproachment. You find me under the sun. Her voice soft and reasonable. And it's enough. It motivates Paul. He sits back to study the problem. And he comes up with a plan. So the plan is this. It's to immobilize a small area of the slope and the upper face of a hole that's dug into the sand. And they might be able to put down a shaft to the pack. And they might be able to use water to do it. But they don't have enough water. So he comes up with the idea. Foam. At this point, we're told again that Jessica is still, so she doesn't disturb the hyper functioning of his mind. And so Paul searches with his nostrils and his eyes, opening up his senses, finds the direction, centers the attention on a dark patch of sand. And of course, here we are, spice. Again, spice, he said, its essence. And we're talking about the attributes of the spice melange. Here we go, a little bit here. Highly alkaline. And I have the para compass. Its power pack is acid based. So we're getting a wee bit of chemistry here from Paul. A little bit of adapt, improvise, overcome, this kind of thing. Jessica sits up straight against the rock. Paul sort of ignores her, going about his business. and she observes him as he does so. The way he walks, uh, and he has no rhythm to tell a marauding worm something of the desert moved here, as it's put. Paul reaches. It's interesting. The way she observes her son, and there's admiration and wonder, and of course we know there's fear. Uh, Paul reaches the spice patch, shovels some into his robe, and returns to the fissure and spills some spice onto the sand in front of Jessica. And he sits down basically and dismantles the para compass using the knife, and takes out a power pack and leaves the dish compartment there. So he basically strips it out. Jessica says you'll need water. So Paul takes a mouthful from his catch tube and expels it into the compartment. And her thoughts, again, Jessica's preoccupation with moisture since they've been on the planet has been our main preoccupation, if you like. If this fails, that water's wasted, is what she's thinking. But at the same time, it doesn't matter if we fail, we're doomed anyway, pretty much. So it won't matter. So it's still that fixation, if you like, that getting into the idea of being on Arrakis and not wasting your water. So for those who want the recipe, spice plus water plus a power pack crystals equals foam. So Paul spills some of the power pack crystals into the water and starts to foam slightly. There's motion above, and there's a little bit of an experiment. Will it work? Let's try it. And what we're told is that there's a line of hawks along the rim of the fissure staring down at open water. And that must be quite interesting if we think about this little bit of water that he's put into a little tiny tray that's it was a compass, is enough water to attract all of these hawks and all these animals that have adapted, to live on Arrakis, and their ability to detect water must be incredible. And this is what Jessica thinks. Great mother! They can sense water even at that distance, and so little of it as well. Again, we're getting our lessons here, aren't we? So Paul reassembles the power compass, leaving out a piece that creates a little hole in it. And he goes back to the fissure. Let me see. It stops. Let me see. Where are we? It's my own handwriting failing me again. Leaving off the reset button, which gave a small hole in the liquid. Taking the reworked instrument in one hand, a handful of spice in the other, Paul went back up the fissure, studying the lay of the slope. His robe billowed gently without the sash to hold it. He waded part way up the slope, kicking off sand rivulets, spurts of dust. So he stops, presses a pinch of the spice into the power compass, shakes the instrument case. And this green foam boils out of the hole where the reset button is. The reset button had been, sorry. And he aims it at the slope and starts spreading a low dike there, began kicking away the sand beneath it, immobilizing the open face with more foam. It's interesting. I don't know if you've ever built a structure out of candle wax or anything like that. I made a little village once out of different colored candles, and you kind of need to keep bits of it molten, if you know what I mean, and allow others to cool to create your, if you want a little bit of river of blue wax or something like that, and you build up a little bank. It's good fun, but I imagine it's something similar. Damming off maybe, as he attempts to, dig down to this. And yeah, he's done a bit of an A-team with this little device, hasn't he? He's jury-rigged, taken apart and fixed this compass in a way to make it a foam dispenser. It's pretty cool. So, yeah. Green foam boils out of the hole. Paul aims it at the slope and it immobilizes open face with more foam. So Jessica says, "Can I help? Come up and dig. We've got 3 meters to go. It's going to be a near thing." So the foam stops Paul's quickly, and he directs the foam barrier as Jessica digs with the hands. So she's digging and he's kind of running this green foam around it. Jessica, how deep? About 3 meters. I can only approximate the position. Slant your digging backward. Don't go straight down. And Jessica again obeys. So we get Paul's. This is our little moment that we talked about before. Paul's moment of self-doubt here. Could I have miscalculated? I'm the one that panicked, caused this mistake. Has that warped my ability? And again, what ability? Is this your ability as a mentat, or is something more than a mentat? And of course, we know pretty much through Thufir that uncertainty and doubt and this kind of thing, emotional doubt, etc., are things that really mess with mentats. So he's having could I have miscalculated? The answer is yes. I suppose anybody can miscalculate. I'm the one that panicked. It didn't really seem like panic. He just went, "Yay, let's go for a slide." And I thought he was thoughtless when he put the bag down, but I didn't come across as panic there. But maybe in his own mind, that's the way he looks at. I caused this mistake. It wasn't that bad, was it? You see what I mean about he just went, let's slide down. That's all he did really. Could I have miscalculated? And again, this is probably to do with his prescient vision. I think that he's running on a bit of this, and it's not working 100%. But his self doubt here shows that Paul is still a fallible mortal, if you like, and just a bit like us. He is still changing, I think. We learned that there's less than 2 ounces of the acid infusion remaining. So they work on the upper face. Paul adds another pinch of spice to the container, creates more foam, and he puts it around Jessica's hands as she works around the hole. So on their second pass, she encounters something hard, slowly worked out the length of the strap, buckle, which is made of plastic. Paul tells her not to move, don't move any more of it. So they're out of this green foam. So Jessica's got hold of this strap in one hand, and it's a bit of a precarious position, and they've run out of this foam. So they're going to have to try and pull this bag out. At the same time, everything was probably going to come down on them again. So Paul says, give me your other hand. I'm going to pull you to the side and downhill. Don't let go of the strap. There'll not be much more spill from the top because of what already came down and buried Jessica. The slope has stabilized. So the aim here really is to keep Jessica's head. So basically, as they pull her, she's probably going to get covered in sand by what's left on the slope that hasn't shifted the first time. And so the goal really is, from Paul's point of view, is to keep Jessica's head above as the hole fills with sand. Keep her head above things. Once the hole's filled, we can dig her out, and then she's got a hold of the pack. We can get the pack. Jessica said, I understand. You ready? Ready. Okay. So this goes ahead, and of course it results with Jessica buried up to her waist, though her left arm and shoulder are still under the sand. So that's that connected to the strap. Her chin's protected by the fold of Paul's robe, and her shoulders aching from the strain. I still have the strap, she says. So plan's working. And Paul works his hand down to the strap. Together, steady pressure. We mustn't break it. Just together, bring it. Don't pull too hard, or else we're going to wreck this strap. And if we do, we'll never see it again. The strap clears the surface, and Paul's mother is free. And together, they pull the pack free. So, again, this very perilous situation. Crashing of thopters, running, trying to find shelter, getting Jessica being buried alive. Then oh no, the pack's been buried, and try to dig it out again. One thing after another. They're having quite an adventurous day, aren't they? Or dawn, I suppose. But they do get the pack, and that means that they can continue to survive on Arrakis. In a few minutes, they're on the floor of the fissure, holding the pack between them. Paul looks at his mother. Green foam-stained face and robe, her sand caked to all over her where the foam had dried. She looks like a target for balls of wet green sand or something like that, as I suppose is the way it's put. Is that really the way he presents that? It's not the best of writing, is it, I think? It's Paul's thoughts, really, isn't it? Foam stained her face, her robe. Sand was caked to her where the foam had dried. She looked as though she had been a target for balls of wet green sand. So it's a bit sloppy writing there, I think. And she looks like somebody's thrown wet green sandy stuff at her when she's covered in wet green sandy stuff. It's a bit weak, I think. Okay, you look a mess, he said. You're not so pretty yourself, she said. And they started to They started to laugh, then sobered. They're not exactly funny, are they? That's they started to laugh and then sobered. Yeah, they're not in a great situation. Maybe they sobered up because their sense of humor is not that bright. I don't know. I thought they could have had a bit. Herbert's writing could have been a wee bit better. That's meant to be a wee bit of bathos there to lighten the situation, and it doesn't really work. And well, it's not. I think maybe Frank doesn't want it to. Bathos is supposed to give you some relief as a reader, and if he doesn't want to do that, you want it's a little bit light, but it's not really effective, and to the point where started to laugh then sobered. It's not. So it's not much relief to the reader, and I think that's all to do with Frank. Frank likes working with tension and pressure on the reader, and wants it to build in certain ways. He'll relieve it when he chooses, if you like. Um, I think particularly some of the stuff that's in Under Pressure, the Dragon in the Sea, particularly that book in terms of tension, pressure, etc. A lot of it's you'll see it in Dune. I think it's very interesting. But that shouldn't have happened. Paul said, "Yeah, I was careless." Jessica's shrugging, and I actually put down. I thought that was odd. Does she shrug like that? Yeah, or no, it's more to do with she's getting rid of the cake sand. I think. And I honestly don't think that it would be that bad. I think if it had happened to anybody, you couldn't have possibly blamed yourself for that. It just happened. Seems like a natural phenomenon, but at the same time, perhaps their ignorance of these natural from different types of sand, etc., is possibly what's caused it. So Paul says, "I'll put up the tent. Better slip off that robe, shake it out." Jessica nods, too tired to answer. And Paul notices and comments that there are anchor holes in the rock. Someone has tented here before. And Jessica's thoughts on this: why not? Yeah, if it's a likely place, if it looks like it's somewhere safe, then it makes sense that if anybody else came here, they would also camp here. It's deep in rock walls, faces another cliff some 4 kilometers away, far enough above the desert to avoid worms, close enough for easy access before crossing. Again, we're learning a bit of smarts about a bit of wisdom about the desert. Goodness gracious. So yeah, why not? She turns, seeing that Paul had the tent up. Jessica's point of view, rib-domed hemisphere, and it blends against the rock walls. Paul steps past her with some binoculars and adjusts the internal pressure with a quick twist of the focused oil lenses. Looks at another cliff, the other cliff, through the morning light. So Jessica watched as he studied that. And here we go, a really interesting phrase here, folks. It's notable that this is an apocalyptic landscape. And I suppose it's notable in terms of, apocalyptic ecologism that's coming out of America in the 60s, etc. That particular term. Apocalyptic, of course, to me just means hidden. Particularly with the New Testament, the revelation of St. John, in the book, is the apocalypse is something that's hidden, and that's why the book of Revelations is revealing what's hidden, if you like. Apocryphal, apocalyptic, often to do with the word hidden. So, but of course, we know it as a nightmarish, end of the world type landscape, I suppose. Which maybe is not fair. Watch as he studied that apocalyptic landscape. There are growing things over there. It doesn't sound too apocalyptic. She grabs the spare binoculars from the frame kit. There, holding the binoculars with one hand, he points, and she looks to where he points. Saguaro bush. Scrawny stuff, says Jessica. Paul says, maybe people nearby. And Jessica wonders, could be the remains of a botanical testing station. She warned. Possibly, again, they're meant to be under the ownership of the emperor, but probably the Fremen that have got control of them. It's pretty far south into the desert, says Paul. Again, he rubs beneath his filter baffle, dries his lips, notes how dry his lips were, the dusty taste of thirst in his mouth. Goodness gracious, how much more of this is there? So we're getting there. Sorry, I've just got plenty more notes. I was wondering, how are we doing? We're not doing too bad for a chunky chapter, folks. Oh dear. I'm going to take a few wee bits of fluids. If anybody's got any questions, or if anybody's still there, say hi for us for a wee second if you like. Mm. Oh, I'm really getting into this pink lemonade stuff. It's very funky. Makes your face do that, if you know what I mean. Now, we are coming to the end of this big chapter. I seem to have plowed through it rightly. As I said, an awful lot of exposition, a lot of action being driven forward, and these little moments, these calm moments of silence in between, where we get reflection and some knowledge and thoughts. So Paul says this is the feeling of a Fremen place. Jessica is saying again this dialogue. Are we certain that the Fremen will be friendly? Paul says, well, Kynes promised their help, and I've put in brackets that means no. Just to anyone with a piece of common sense, someone promised their help. That are we certain the Fremen will be friendly? Kynes promised their help. To me, that's a no. And Jessica's thoughts here. But no, we always talk about buts here. There's desperation in the people of the desert. I felt some of it myself today. Desperate people might kill us for our water. Ever focused on moisture, water, etc., etc. And again, Jessica goes to this little. For the second time here, her thoughts go to Caladan. And I've started to think a lot about how Jessica and Caladan, particularly her associations from about the planet, and I'm kind of curious as to where Jessica is born. First of all, I'm wondering what planet she's from. Is she born on Caladan? I'm not too sure. But particularly, we're talking. I was sort of thinking about Jessica in terms of mythological overlays, and I'm thinking very much that Atalanta is a good, interesting mythological character, and of course is associated with the Caledonian hunt, and that Caladan in Dune is of course Caledon from Greek mythology, Greek history. Sorry, places are tend to be real. So she, after having these wee thoughts about people might kill us for the water, she closes her eyes, thinking of Caladan. And against this wasteland, I'll just read this wee bit actually. Against this wasteland, conjured in her mind a scene from Caladan. There had been a vacation trip once on Caladan, she and Duke Leto, before Paul's birth. They'd flown over the southern jungles, above the weed-wild shouting leaves and rice paddies of the deltas, and they had seen the ant lines in the greenery, man gangs carrying their loads on suspensor-buoyed shoulder poles, and in the sea reaches there'd been the white petals of trimaran dows, all of it gone. So we get these, I suppose, this vacation that she's had with Leto, flown over southern jungles above the weed wild shouting leaves and rice paddies of the deltas, the ant lines and the greenery man gig. Really did make me think of Vietnam, to be honest with you, that kind of description. Not too sure why, but of course it's a water world, lush, rich jungles, etc. on Caladan. And of course the wee description of the boats, etc. All very, where are we? And in the sea reaches, there'd been the white petals of trimaran dows. So a dow from the Arabic dawa, I believe. My Arabic is zero, by the way, so apologies to anybody for pronunciation. A dow is a triangular shaped ship with one or two masts, common in the Arabian region. In fact, I've made a note here that they're supposed to be common, and particularly in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. And of course, a trimaran is a yacht with three hulls. So that's these type of vehicles that she's describing from above, I suppose. And again, you're getting this overlap that might kill us for moisture. This takes her to Caladan, thinking of the wetness, the rice paddies, the deltas. The use of the word man gangs is quite interesting there, I think, and I'm not too sure what to think about it. Gangs of men carrying their loads on suspensor-buoyed shoulder poles, and that kind of evokes kind of people carrying stuff on poles, if you know what I mean, in I suppose, what would you think? Fantastical novels like King Solomon's Mines, that kind of stuff, the Tarzan books, but you think there's the technology that sounds like men are still bearing things like this. It's an odd image. And it's all gone, of course. It sounds like a good memory to her, or for her. She opened her eyes to the desert stillness, this contrast of this memory, the mounting warmth of the day, the restless heat devils set the air a quiver out on open sand. Other rock faces across like like a thing seen through cheap glass, like a haze with the heat. And I don't know. To me, it sounds like the landscape has its own charm, if you like. And for anybody who hasn't seen, I know we talk about Denis Villeneuve's Dune and Oh, the Majesty of the Desert, etc. It's absolutely nothing compared to, um, David Leans's Lawrence of Arabia, where you really do see things like that in the film. And even Mad Max Fury Road, the Namibian desert there is just beautiful. So I don't know. It's very much a contrast, if you like. But she's opened her eyes to this, whereas her eyes are closed to Caladan. I feel like one's a dream, one's a reality. Spill of sand hissed down, loosed by puffs of morning breeze by the hawks lifting away from the cliff tops. There's no water for the hawks, and off they go. And when the sandfall was gone, they can still hear this hissing, and it grows louder. And a sound that once heard, never forgotten. So we've had a worm previously. Here's another one. Worm, Paul whispered. Come, and it comes from the right. And this is a nice little bit of phrasing here, I think. Where are we? Worm. It came from the right with an uncaring majesty. That's the bit I like. That could not be ignored. An uncaring majesty that could not be ignored. Just this enormous thing that seems to be majestic. But you're not going to ignore it. I like it. It's just a good way of putting that. How the worm moves. A twisting burrow mound of sand cut through the dunes within their field of vision. The mound lifted in front, dusting away like a bow wave in water, and then it was gone, coursing off to the left. The sound diminished and died. Same thing again here. We've talked about previous, always spaceships. I've seen space frigates that were smaller. Paul whispered. What was it you had previously with the worm? Hang on, I think I make it easy to find stuff about worms because I draw them here. Worm sure to be Oh no, here that was the ornithopter, wasn't it? Backing up a wee bit. Worm. There we go. Yeah, the previous one, bigger than a guild spaceship we had. This is the worm that got the thopter. And this time, that's what Paul said previously in this chapter. And of course, this time it's we're seeing space frigates that were smaller. It's always been compared to spaceships. Jessica nods, just continues to stare. Where the worm passed remained a tantalizing gap. It flowed bitterly endless before them, beckoning beneath its horizontal collapse of skyline. So again, just where it's been, that's, oh dear, that's the bit they have to go across, isn't it? When we've rested, we should continue with your lessons. So Paul suppresses sudden anger. So this is Jessica taking control here. I think very much in a sense, I think, with what's happening, with kind of just go with the flow, be like I don't know, butterfly on the wind, this kind of thing. Jessica's been doing that. And just at the end of this chapter, I think, is her own fears, concerns, etc. for Paul kick in. And I think we see her take control back here. It's when we've rested, we should continue with your lessons. Paul suppresses a sudden anger. Mother, don't you think we could do without? She just cuts him off. Today you panicked. You know your mind and been doing nervature perhaps better than I do. But you have much to learn about your body's prana musculature. The body does things of itself sometimes, Paul. I can teach you this. You must learn to control every muscle, every fiber of your body. You need review of the hands. Sorry, I wasn't meaning to give anybody the finger. I had I thought I just did that there, but I had a lighter there. So review. Apologies, not giving anybody the fingers. Review of the hands there. And again, we talked about the hand. The hand's really important imagery, I think. Well, we've had the wings as well, with Paul taking flight, if you like, in his ornithopter. Damaged wing, damaged hands, this kind of thing, the left hand and the right hand, agency, all of this kind of thing. You need to review of the hands. Start with finger muscles, palm tendons, tip sensitivity. I don't know. I'm a guitar player. For many, many years, I have a full combination of little exercises that I do with my hands. Because, in fact, the last gig I did professionally, my hands turned to jelly. I had complete muscle collapse here, which is quite interesting because it makes your hand just curve around like this, almost like a seashell. And I just couldn't do anything. So working at your hand, your muscles, particularly if you're a guitar player, there's all sorts of wee things, but one of the hard things is to get your hands to make certain shapes. So you have your A, your B, your C, your D, your E, your F, your G, etc., and A minors, etc. So I used to just sit and go through them all with just on my hands, etc. I get that kind of idea. Similar thing, maybe if anybody's ever seen Callum, if you know what I mean, with Edward Woodward before he was the Equalizer. Callum does a thing where he trains his hands for a fight into sand. It's quite interesting. So he needs to learn a bit more about his prana musculature. You need review of the hands. She turned away. Come into the tent now. And we get Paul flexes the fingers on his left hand, watching her crawl through the sphincter valve. And he is knowing, and this is the bit interesting, it's interesting, I think, knowing that he cannot deflect her from this determination and that he must agree. I've put why there, and it must be to do with something that for the, whatever path or whatever it is for them to survive, this has to be a part of it. And of course, the realization for Paul is that whatever has been done to me, I've been a party to it. He thought, review of the hand. And he looked at his hand. There we go. How inadequate it appeared when measured against such creatures as the worm. And we've made it to the end of that chapter, which is an absolute nightmare, I thought. And it's an interesting thing to consider, the symbology in Dune, particularly with the two moons. The moons, the Fremen are also known as the children of the moon, as well as the children of Mizir. So there we go, and it takes us on. Of course, we've also had a mention of Gurney Halleck here, and of course we're going to immediately in the start of the next chapter, we're going to see that he has actually survived. So this chapter, it's kind of out of the frying pan into the fire almost, I think, in terms of the action. They've escaped the storm. That cliffhanger leads us into another perilous situation. I thought it's very, 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 very sort of Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers type stuff, I think, in that sense. Jessica reverts to almost a bit of a scream queen, if you like, briefly, but and is passive throughout most of this, and is put in peril by the hero, I suppose. She's buried alive in sand. Nearly does it twice too. And we start to learn a bit about the terrain, the different types of ground, sand, the minutiae, the details of all of these things that we've. Pea gravel, flake rock, pea sand, sand itself, we're told, grit, dust, gossamer powder. All of these different things have different effects. We can even see how they affect the still suit, the technology of the still suit. Still suit has to be maintained, arguably probably on a daily basis, considering the terrain. We learn a bit about water discipline, drink all your water. Axioms. We get some more quotations from the Orange Catholic Bible, which we've of course discovered our Old Testament, quotations slightly rephrased. Axioms, all sorts of things, clothing, and we get a real sense of the planet starting. And it's just a little. All we've done is travel around a little bit of rock, looking for somewhere to camp for the day. They haven't really done too much, if you see what I mean. And of course, that the worms can remove evidence of anybody having been there. We've got a little bit of pathos. We've got a tiny bit of pathos that doesn't really relieve any tension. And I think that's partly the nature of the cliffhangers here. Yeah, prana, by the way, let's just have a wee quick look before we finish off tonight. So we have prana, musculature, the body's muscles when considered as units for ultimate training. Just see Bindu. But within that, I suppose we'll have a wee maybe we chat about prana and Bindu. But you can look both of them up on Wikipedia, for example, or something like that. So prana, just to give you a quick idea, in this sense, in yoga, Indian medicine, Indian martial arts, prana, the Sanskrit word for breath, life force, vital principle, permeates reality on all levels, including inanimate objects. In Hindu literature, prana is sometimes described as originating from the sun and connecting the elements. There are 5 types of prana, collectively known as the 5 vayus or winds, and described in Hindu texts. Ayurveda, Tantra, and Tibetan medicine all describe prana vayu as the basic vayu from which all other vayus arise. And we're told that prana, this is just the introductory stuff on Wikipedia, is divided into 10 main functions. 5 pranas, which are prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana, and the 5 upa pranas, which are naga, karma, devarata, krikala, and dananyaya. Hope I'm pronouncing those correct. So pranayama is one of the 8 limbs of yoga, is intended to expand prana. So there we go. Vital air. And of course, Bindu, very quickly, there we are. Pretty much as a term meaning point or dot, and I also referred to symbol. So the Sanskrit word for point, drop, or dot. And I thought that was quite cool. In Tantra, let me see. Well, the one that I'm looking at here, purple Bindu chakra, may also be kind of like a dot with it. It's like a Mr. Smiley, actually, a purple smiling moon. Yeah, so there we go. Yoga, and etc., etc. So there we go. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions or anything, if anybody's even still there. But goodness, it was a very, very dense chapter. And as I said, it was kind of one that nearly broke my back in terms of me trying to get all this sort of work done. And things sort of just go a wee bit easier on us from now on. And we're about to start. We'll look at chapter 28, as I said, which is one with Gurney and Esmer Truex. And that's not a particularly long chapter, I have to say. So it's not our usual fare in terms of how we work. I suppose it's just an awful lot of within the text, exposition, direction, movement of the narrative, sort of punctuated by I suppose that both Jessica and Paul's viewpoints on what they've just been through. Jessica sort of, again, both characters' comments or thoughts about the litany and the litany's magic, how useful it was. I think it's very interesting. And it's just more and more action. And again, review of the hand. We're not left on a cliffhanger this time as such, but it's a little bit more interesting. A little bit, what's that about, So there we go. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, it's 12:25, and I think we've been at it from 10. These big chapters are, I love it when they're a bit smaller, I have to say. So there we go. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me tonight. And we were supposed to be back last night, starting up again after about a month or so's break. So, so I do apologize, but I still have a bunch of comments and emails to get to reply to people to. So I still haven't forgot, folks. Just our life didn't get any easier, unfortunately. So I kind of thought it would, and we could come back to this. So it's just been a matter of time, and I promise we'll get a wee sort of. I'll probably actually maybe take. What day is this? Friday. Maybe take a part of the weekend and maybe get around to answering all that correspondence. Oh goodness, it's a terrible thing not to respond to people, I think. And I've just been for the last month haven't been able to get a letter, a phone call, an email, or anything off. It's just been a bit mad here, but it's good to get back to this old book club, I have to say. I mean, of course, you can tell we've decorated, as somebody pointed out. So there we go, folks. It's well, it must be Saturday in the AM now, coming up to 26 minutes past midnight. So If we've got no other questions or something, we'll be back on Thursday at 10 o'clock. And the idea is to run this book club every Thursday at 10 p.m. GMT +1 for now. And we'll be doing one chapter a week. So our next chapter for Thursday coming, we should have been on Thursday, but we just got kicked by YouTube three times in a row last night. We just couldn't get going. So our next chapter is page 273 in this terrible edition with all the loads of misprints. And it will be the epigraph. We came from Caladan, a paradise world for our form of life. That's the one we're looking at for next time. And just to see, are we going to? No, it's not this chapter, but the following one is where we'll actually. There we go. I've even got a wee on my book written there. It's going to be the halfway point. So looking forward to that. And goodness, we'll have hit. It seems like we're further into it. If you know what I mean. But of course, the back of the book isn't all story. It does cover the appendices. So that's kind of the way we're working. We've done this to go, and then there's the appendices. Sorry, terrible on me. There we go, folks. Well, listen, anyway, thank you very much for joining me. We'll put all these up as usual on the Doc Sloan Science Fiction Station Dune Book Club playlist if you want to check them out later. And hopefully we'll be back on Monday with, I don't know what we're going to call it, but we won't be doing the Science Fiction Fridays because Friday's not generally good for us. So we're going to move that little science fiction chat to Mondays. We'll have to figure out some kind of alliterative name for it, won't we? So I hope you can join me on the Science Fiction Station on the day of the moon, 10 o'clock GMT +1 for a bit of general science fiction chat. Anything that goes. I'm just wrapping up with Stranger Things at the minute. It's been quite good. Yeah, and otherwise, folks, if it's for the Dune Book Club, then we'll see you back here on Thursday at 10 p.m. GMT +1. In the meantime, look after yourselves, take care of yourselves no matter where you are in the world, and look after your loved ones and be safe. And all the very best. Thank you very much. Good night. Good morning, even. Bye. See you.